It took me 5 years. I had to save $120. It took me 5 years to get the $120 to buy a stock, 3 shares of Citi Service Preferred when I was 11. My dad originally was in the investment business. He really wasn't very interested in it, but I would go down on Saturday morning and he had these books there in the office, and I read all those, and then I went to the Omaha Public Library, and I read every book on investments in the Omaha Public Library by the time we moved to Washington. And then when we got here, I had the Library of Congress.
Did you get through all those?
Oh, I read everything, and I just found it fascinating, and incidentally, I find it fascinating today. I mean, it's an activity. You know, if you're a baseball player or something, your legs may go or something. Well, my legs have long gone, but it doesn't make any difference in what I do. So it's I literally have as much. I always have had fun working, but I have as much fun now as I've ever had in my life. I always think my favorite time's gonna be tomorrow. You know, it's always been fun. A marvelous fellow named Lorimer Davidson spent 4 hours with me teaching me all about insurance, and he helped me so much in life. You're gonna get helped by some wonderful people in life. It's a great thing to remember later on when you get to be my age, that all the help you've received from different people, because nobody does it alone. Obama got in trouble when he said that in the campaign, that nobody does it by themselves. Nobody does do it by themselves. We all sit in the shade of trees that were planted by others. So it's obligatory, I think, to plant a few trees ourselves if we've had good luck. It's been a great ride, but it's not over.
So when did you actually buy Geico? When did you invest in Geico the first time?
Well, Geico I met Lorimer Davidson when I was finishing up at Columbia, and then I started selling securities when I got out. And I went out to my Aunt Alice. My Aunt Alice would have bought anything from me. And so she bought 100 shares of Government Employees Insurance. It was the first stock I ever sold. And then a lot of years passed, and Mr. Davidson was very kind to me in a variety of ways. But I went in different directions. And then in 1976, the company got in big trouble because they miscalculated their reserves, and they were going broke. And so I came back here, and I bought a third of the company in the market in a very short period of time. And then in 1995, by now our third had become a half because they'd repurchased their shares. And I went out to see Mr. Davidson, who was out in Bethesda. He was 96 or 97, and he had a bunch of stock in Geico with no cost basis because he'd held it forever. And I said, Davey, if I make an offer for this company for cash, you're going to pay a big tax. And of course, if you die with the stock, you don't have that tax. You get a stepped-up basis. So I'm not going to make this offer unless it's all right with you. And he said to me, Warren, I've hoped for this all my life. And so we bought the rest of the company. He was a great man. I bought a book in 1949 by a fellow named Ben Graham called The Intelligent Investor. I don't remember what I paid, but aside from what I paid for my 2 marriage licenses, that was the best investment I ever made. It's very important to have the right framework. You need to have an approach to investing that's sound. And Graham's approach is simple, but some people adopt to it, and which I did immediately, and most people don't. But if you have the right philosophy, you will find opportunities as you go through the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years. And frankly, you're most likely to find them when in periods like 5 years ago when we were having the panic. I mean, stocks sell at silly prices from time to time. Most stocks at one time or another sell at very silly prices. And it doesn't take a high IQ to figure out that they're cheap, but it does take a temperament that's willing to step up and actually act. I tell people, if they're going in the investment business, if you got 160 IQ, sell 30 points to somebody else because you won't need it. I mean, I figured out very early, you don't have to be that smart in this business, which is fortunate, but you do have to have the right temperament. And you have to be able to ignore what other people are saying and simply look at the facts and decide, is this stock which is selling at X worth 2X? And occasionally you'll find things like that. And when you don't find them, you don't do anything. I don't know where I'm going to invest next. That's what makes my job interesting. I mean, I'm not kidding. I mean, if you went out and played golf and every drive went in the hole, you'd give up. The game wouldn't be interesting. I mean, what's interesting is when you get in the rough and have to come out and a few things like that. So I love the fact that I don't know what I'm going to do. In 2006, in the fall, I got a letter from a fellow, and I never heard of him, and I never heard of the company he was talking about. But he said, my name is Eitan Wertheimer, and I want to tell you a little about my company, Ishkar. The letter was a page and a half long, and he said, if he sold the company, the family sold the company, the only company they wanted to sell it to was Berkshire Hathaway. And if I was interested, they'd be glad to come over from Israel and explain it to me. And it just jumped off the page that this was an interesting idea. So I emailed them, and they came over very shortly, and we bought the business. We handed them $4 billion for 80% of a company where I'd never seen it or anything. Eitan kept saying, you got to come over to Israel and see the plants and everything. You won't believe how wonderful they are. And I said, Eitan, I don't go to Council Bluffs, Iowa. You know, I mean, I am doing fine in Omaha. And he said, no, you got to see it. I said, no, I don't. I said, we can make a deal without seeing it. He said, well, if you buy the company, will you come and see it? I said, if we buy the company, I'll come. So we bought the company, and I went over there, and it's true. I've never seen plants like this. It was the greatest operation I've ever seen. And Eitan said to me, he said, you know, that's why I want you to come over to see these things. I said, listen, Eitan, if I'd come and seen them, I'd have paid more money. So it's very hard to write regulations that will keep people from acting foolishly, particularly when acting foolishly has been proven very profitable over the preceding few years. It's just the way it works. Humans, you know, they all think they're Cinderella at the ball, you know, and they think, you know, as the night goes along, the music gets better and the drinks flow and everything, and they think they all think they're going to leave at 2 minutes to 12, and of course there's no clocks on the wall, and they're still dancing. So it'll happen again, but buy when it happens. I'll be buying. There is a very, I think, structural problem as a market system gets more and more specialized. If you go back to an agrarian society like we had a couple hundred years ago with most people working on a farm, most people fit most job requirements. I mean, it was that as the world has become more and more specialized, I think we keep moving away from that. So a market system will not pay well for a significant percentage of society. They aren't needed to keep GDP itself going up and people at the top. And I think government has to address that. I think it's, I sometimes toss out to students this proposition. Imagine that it's 24 hours before you're born, and you're sitting there, Johnny or Joni, we don't know yet, and you're in the womb, and a genie comes, and the genie says, John or Joni, you strike me as a remarkable potential human being, and I'm going to give you an enormous responsibility. I'm going to let you decide the world, how the world is going to work into which you're going to emerge. You can decide on the economic system, the social system, the political system. You design it. And whatever you design, that's going to be the system in which you live, your children live, grandchildren live. And you, being wise beyond your minus 24 hours of age, say, I know all about you, genies. What's the catch? And the genie says there's one catch. Just before you emerge, having designed the system, put it in cement, you're going to go over to that barrel over there that has 7 billion slips in it, one for every human being in the world, and you're going to pull out a slip. It may say male, it may say female, it may say white, it may say black, it may say infirm, it may say strong, it may say bright, it may say below average, it may say United States, it may say Bangladesh. Now, not knowing which ticket you're going to pull out, what kind of a world do you want to design? Well, you certainly want to design a world that produces lots of goods and services and keeps producing more and more. You want a lot of stuff around. It could be the world's fairest society, but if it's on a barren desert island, it isn't going to do anybody good. So you really want something that works in terms of output. But once you have something that works in terms of output, you certainly want something that eliminates fear from everybody's life. Now, that doesn't just mean a lot of cops. It means fear of old age, fear of health, all of those problems. And you certainly want a system not knowing what tickets you're going to get that takes care of the people that don't survive so well in that market system, which maximizes the amount of output, your first goal. And I think we've done a wonderful job at the first stage. We have learned how to turn out lots of stuff. We have not thought as much, although we've thought a fair amount. I mean, when Social Security came in and all of that, I mean, this country has developed in terms of thinking about how a rich family should behave. But we have not, I think we are in the stage where we need to focus more on making sure that the people who get the bad tickets do better than they are. And, we said that blacks were 3/5 or slaves were 3/5 of a person back when we started. We said all men are created equal in 1776, and in 1789 we said blacks are 3/5 of a person. We not only said all men are created equal, but in the Gettysburg Address, Lincoln repeated it. It was 1920 before we passed the 19th Amendment for women. So we treated women as an essentially different class for all those years. So I think we've gone significantly in the right direction in terms of behaving better as a society, and I think we've gone terrifically in the right direction in terms of turning out lots of stuff. But I think we have to address the question of how do you treat the people that are left behind in a system that maximizes the output of goods and services. You don't have to be right about thousands and thousands and thousands of companies. You only have to be right about a couple. I met Bill Gates on July 5th, 1991. We were out in Seattle, and Bill said, "You've got to have a computer." And I said, "Why?" And he said, "You can do your income tax on it." I said, "I don't have any income. Berkshire doesn't pay a dividend." He said, "Well, you can keep track of your portfolio." And I said, "I only have one stock." I said, and he says, "It's going to change everything." And I said, "Well, will it change whether people chew gum?" And he said, "Well, probably not." And I said, "Well, will it change what kind of gum they chew?" And not. And I said, "Well, then I'll stick to chewing gum and you stick to computers." I don't have to understand all kinds of business. There's all kinds of business I don't understand. But there's thousands of opportunities there. I did understand the Bank of America, and I'll be able. I'm able to do that. I'm able to understand some given percentage. But Ted Williams wrote a book called The Science of Hitting. And in The Science of Hitting, he's got a diagram, shows him at the plate, and he's got the strike zone divided into 77 squares, each the size of a baseball. And he says, if I only swing at pitches in my sweet zone, which he shows there, and he has what his batting average would be, which is 400. If he had to swing at low outside pitches, but still in the strike zone, his average would be 230. He said the most important thing in hitting is waiting for the right pitch. Now, he was at a disadvantage because if the count was 0-2 or 1-2 or so on, even if that ball was down where he was only going to bat 230, he had to swing at it. In investing, there's no called strikes. People can throw Microsoft at me and, you name it, any stock, General Motors, and I don't have to swing. And nobody's going to call me out on called strikes. I only get a strike called if I swing at a pitch and miss. So I can wait there and look at thousands of companies day after day, and only when I see something I understand and when I like the price at which it's selling, then if I swing, if I hit it, fine. If I miss it, it's a strike. But it's an enormously advantageous game, and it's a terrible mistake to think you have to have an opinion on everything. You only have to have an opinion on a few things. In fact, I've told students, if when they got out of school, they got a punch card with 20 punches on it, and that's all the investment decisions they got to make in their entire life, they would get very rich because they would think very hard about each one. And you don't need 20 right decisions to get very rich. 4 or 5 will probably do it over time. So I don't worry too much about the things I don't understand. If you understand some of these businesses that are coming along and can spot things on, if you can spot on Amazon, for example, I mean, it's a tremendous accomplishment what Jeff Bezos has done. And I tip my hat to him. He's a wonderful businessman. He's a good guy too. But could I have anticipated that he would be the success and 10 others wouldn't be? I'm not good enough to do that. But fortunately, I don't have to. I don't have to form an opinion on Amazon. And I did form an opinion on the Bank of America, and I formed an opinion on Coca-Cola. I mean, Coca-Cola's been around since 1886. There's 1.8 billion 8-ounce servings of Coca-Cola products sold every day. Now, if you take 1 penny and get 1 penny extra, that's $18 million a day. And 18 million times 365 is 7 billion free less 730 billion, or $6,570,000,000. So annually, $6,570,000,000 from 1 penny. Do you think Coca-Cola is worth a penny more than Joe's Cola? I think so. So, and I've got about 127 years of history that would indicate it. So those are the kind of decisions I like to make. And you may have an entirely different field of expertise than I would have, and probably much more up to date in terms of the kind of businesses that we're seeing evolve. And you can get very rich if you just understand a few of them and understand their future. But fortunately, I don't have to. I mean, if we go into Heinz, and I look at people pouring ketchup on, hamburgers and potatoes. I don't think it's going to change. And the nice thing about it, some products travel, some products don't travel. Candy bars don't travel well. I mean, if you look at the Cadbury bars in England, they don't sell well here. And if you look at the Hershey bars here, they don't sell as well someplace else. Soft drinks travel, and ketchup travels. I like products that travel.
Well, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Warren.